Yeah, you saw me know, right?
165. Yeah. When you're a temperature test, you just want to what what
What's your secret?
they don't want is you sitting there,
Right, there you go.
you're starting like, oh, I remember what the state has, like that, instead of just doing so you walk up and another person to
We used to have an expression when we were talking with leadership, we would say, if you have a night meeting, you
that's why I gave
take
this
one of
schedule.
the meetings in the morning, that morning, or next morning off. We're expecting you guys to work 3 sessions.
It shows people in the group.
Yeah, you can be on stage anyway because we're doing the East School. So when the East School is done, have a seat. So that's why I gave everybody these things so you can see where you're at. So we're doing the East School, everyone's gonna be on stage. And
I'm first award.
There you go.
I'm sure you know that.
sorry.
Well, we had so many things in our life, but we did much better.
So all that stuff. So you don't mean to come up, but you know as you're doing it.
They're going, hey,
you know
it's 9:45, my family's waiting for me. I'm leaving.
But I would come up on stage.
That's one of the biggest things.
I would come up and
Okay, I'll do my business. Maybe you'll like it.
Right.
there's a good chance, you know, I've been inviting you every year. I keep hoping that, you'll keep us on your list for next year. Keep us on your list for next year.
No, try and keep all these things together. Thursday.
Right. I saw that too, but I was just waiting.
No, you don't have to worry.
That's a good point. I was on that small people that got surgery.
Is in the Walgreens?
Okay, right here? Right.
So sorry I didn't make it, so I had an appointment. Yeah, I'm good.
Give us a chance to talk about it.
Yeah, and I hope it's a little nice meeting.
We did.
I wasn't there, my ears were not buzzing. You have a good turnout?
Only 6
6?
7.
My daughter's house, oh, that's really cool.
So Gail and I,
That's cool. He's got a snow gauge.
it's metal and it's sticking out. Yeah, I've got it where I can read it out from bedroom windows. Outside the window. Go outside and get out of here.
Never met a stranger, right?
No, never. It's a whole life story.
I graduated in 1969. University
Oh.
But at that time, University City School was a non-profit. And the car was from
Wow.
We did that.
Yeah.
And you too. Okay, good.
Yeah, I was gonna say you shouldn't have to. Hey, Paul, thanks for the favor. I was hoping other people would show up who I haven't had a son for. Dave Roberts, his wife Shelley, was in the hospital. He just called yet, I don't think that. He had a very, very short life. So in June, it's towards the end. They're very Shelley Wow, would be 60 days. So good to see it. So if you would like to do that. Thank you, appreciate it.
Go down to SSM.
By the way, when I sign cards, I never even look how long or short they are. I just give it one to everybody. We got that. Right now, I just look to see who had the short part.
Okay.
We got the short stick here, so just FYI.
You saving a spot?
There is a spot, right? Hey, Dean. Said Dean, if I fall asleep.
Is Tracy here? No, she actually is making some food for her kids have business is having an open house tomorrow night. So she's working on that. Right. Looking forward to your presentation.
You just wing it. Sanford just told me he has 6 words that he shares with everybody that loses their place.
Shabbat Shalom, everybody. So good to see you. We want to be sure that you have a prayer book and a little program tonight. We have some tefillot, we have some worship prayers that are in here and songs, so make sure you have one of those. And relax and be comfortable here. We welcome you who are visiting too with us online on this beautiful Shabbat evening in Madison, Wisconsin. Shabbat Shalom to everyone.
So it's still the month of Adar, and there is a nigun that we've been singing these last month and a half or so that was written specifically for Adar, but its other name, the person who named this nigun named it after the first description of Mordechai in the book of Esther, which is just Ish Yehudi, Jewish man. So I thought it was appropriate that we still sing it this evening. Ya da 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 ya da 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 ya da 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 ya da da ya da 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 ya da 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 ya da 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 ya da 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 ya da 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 ya da 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 ya da da ya da 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 ya da 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 ya da 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 ya da 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 ya da 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 ya da 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 ya da 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 ya da 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 ya da 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 ya da da ya da 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 ya da da ya da da ya da 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 ya da 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 ya da 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 na 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 ya na 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 ya na 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 ya na na ya na 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 ya na 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 ya na 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 ya na 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 ya na 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 ya na 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 ya na na ya na 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 ya na 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 ya na 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 ya na 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 ya na 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 ya na 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 ya na 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 ya na 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 ya na 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 ya na 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 ya na 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 ya na 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 ya na 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 ya na 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 ya na 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 na.
Shabbat Shalom. I want to invite people for a few moments to look around where you're seated. And if you see a familiar face, say Shabbat Shalom. If you see someone who's unfamiliar to you, especially, welcome them with Shabbat Shalom. So just take a few moments and say hello to one another. Make sure you know whom you're sitting near. And although we don't have time for extensive conversations, we know that at the Oneg Shabbat, you'll have the opportunity. For those of you who are online, if you want to leave a comment, I think the comment section may be open. Wish one another a Shabbat, over here. Wish one another a Shabbat Shalom as well. Let people know that you're there and engage one another in the job of community building. We're so glad to have you here with us tonight. Friends, during this sacred time that is Shabbat, as we gather here in peace after our long weeks of travail and work, and as we bring our thoughts and our minds together, both for respite and for inspiration, let us give thanks for the companionship of good friends around us. Let us offer gratitude for one another, to one another for this blessed day. And let us also remember and recognize that each of us is here in this world for a unique and special purpose, and that all we need to do is to find it and to revel in it. Look, we know that accomplishments will come. We know that successes will be ours. We also know that from our failures, we will learn. We will continue to learn. And as a result of our gathering here in community, a community of Temple Beth El, a community of friends, and welcome new people who are here perhaps for their first time, we know that we can grow stronger in this community with one another. Just as the Israelite slaves coming out from their captivity found their Mount Sinai after a long and sometimes perilous journey, so too may we find solace and comfort from the love that we gain and give to our friends and neighbors in this very complex world. I want to invite you to turn to the supplement on page 3.
So I've been doing this, we've been singing this song here, the Shabbat right after Purim for the last couple of years. This song was written exactly for this time of year. The text is in Ladino, and it translates as, Purim is over, Pesach is at hand. This idea that we're in this in-between holiday space where we've left one and we're immediately starting to think about the next, perhaps. So it's been a year since we've sung it, so let's refamiliarize, reacquaint ourselves, perhaps. I'll have you all just repeat a little bit after me. You'll notice that in each of the verses, the first couple of lines and the last couple of lines are the same. So we'll allow that to kind of ease ourselves into reacquainting ourselves. First part goes like this. Purim, 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 Lano. Try that. Purim, 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 Lano. Beautiful. Next part is the same melody. Pesach, Pesach, ala mano. Together. Pesach, Pesach, ala mano. And then if you want, you can join with me on this part, or if you want, you can also just receive on Las masas están faciendo. Las masas están faciendo. Los yapraquis están cociendo. Los yapraquis están cociendo. Aman, 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 aman. Your turn. Aman, 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 aman. Il Dio bendijo mosta mazal. Il Dio bendijo mosta mazal. Again. Aman, 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 aman. Il Dio bendijo mosta mazal. From the beginning. Purim, 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 Lano, Pesach, Pesach, a la mano, las masas están haciendo, los yapraquis están cociendo, aman, 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 il Dio bendijo mosta mazal, aman, 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 il Dio bendijo mosta mazal. Pesach, Pesach, a la mano, la nonna está diciendo a los nietos a limpiar el polvo, cantones y los techos. Aman, 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 il Dio bendijo mosta mazal. Aman, 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 il Dio bendijo mosta mazal. Purim, 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 Lano, Pesach, Pesach, a la mano, Señor Rubio, dijo a las tías no comer el pan 8 días. Aman, 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 il Dio bendijo mosta mazal. Aman, 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 il Dio bendijo mosta mazal. Ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la 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 la. Aman, 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 il Dio bendijo somos da mazal. Aman, 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 aman. Il yo bendicho mos da mazal.
We turn to the prayer books for benedictions, for lighting the Shabbat candles. I'd like to invite the community to turn to page 120 and 121 in the prayer books. And as a community, we read together at the middle of page 121. Please join one another. O source of light and truth, creator of the eternal law of goodness, help us to find knowledge by which to live. Lead us to take the words we shall speak into our hearts and our lives. Bless all who enter this sanctuary in need, all who bring the offerings of their hearts. May our worship lead us to acts of kindness, peace, and love.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel Shabbat.
On this evening of Men's Club Shabbat. On this evening of Men's Club Shabbat, we are inviting members of our Men's Club to join us here on the Bima to offer worship for us, with us, and to, when you see, you know where your parts are, friends, and so when it's your turn, just come on up a little bit early, and you'll be reading, most of you, from right here between the cantor and me. So, and use this microphone here. So, for Kabbalat Shabbat, as we prepare our souls and we prepare our voices, we invite you to turn to page 132 in the prayer book for Or Zarua. It's the last paragraph at the very bottom of the page. Or Zarua, this selection from Psalm 97.
Or Zarua la tzadik ul yishrei lev simcha. Or Zarua la tzadik ul yishrei lev simcha. Or Zarua la tzadik ul yishrei lev simcha. Ul yishrei lev simcha. Or Zarua la tzadik ul yishrei lev simcha. Ul yishrei lev simcha. Yai lai 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 lai. Yai lai lai. Yai lai 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 lai. Yai lai lai. Or Zarua la tzadik ul yishrei lev simcha. Or Zarua la tzadik ul yishrei lev simcha. Or Zarua la tzadik ul yishrei lev simcha. Ul yishrei lev simcha. Or Zarua la tzadik ul yishrei lev simcha. Ul yishrei lev simcha. Lai 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 lai. Yai lai lai. Yai lai 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 lai. Yai lai lai.
As we prepare to offer Lecha Dodi, which is on page 138, bear in mind that when we ask the congregation to rise, we're doing so in body or in spirit. That is your choice. So join us when we rise for Lecha Dodi, whenever we rise during these community worship services, in body or in spirit. We continue on page 138 with Lecha Dodi, verses 1, 5, 8, and 9 tonight.
Yai la 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 yai la 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 ya la 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 ya la 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 lecha dodi likrat kala b'nei Shabbat nekabela shamor v'zachor b'dibur echad ishmiyanu el hameyuchad Adonai echad u'shemo echad l'shem u'tiferet ve'litila lecha dodi nikrat kala b'nei Shabbat nekabela hitoreri ki ba'orech kumi ori uri uri shir daberi yevod Adonai alaich nikla lecha dodi likrat kala b'nei Shabbat nekabela yamin u'smol tifrotzi ve'et Adonai ta'aritzi al yad ish ben parti v'nismecha v'nagila lecha dodi likrat kala b'nei Shabbat nekabela.
Rise in body or in spirit. Turn toward the door.
Oi v'shalom ateret ba'ala gam b'simcha u'v'tzola toch emunei am segula boi chala lecha dodi nikrat kala b'nei Shabbat nekabela lecha dodi nikrat kala b'nei Shabbat nekabela.
On page 140, Psalm 92, a song for this day, a song for Shabbat, Tov Lehodot, 140.
Mizmor shir liyom haShabbat Tov lehodot l'Adonai ulzamer l'shimcha elyon Tov lehodot l'Adonai ulzamer l'shimcha elyon להגיד בבוקר חסדך ואמונתך בלילות טוב להודות לאדוני ולזמר לשמך עליון טוב להודות לאדוני ולזמר לשמך עליון עלי עשור ועלי Adonai, Ulzamer Leshimcha Elyon, Ulzamer Leshimcha Elyon.
As we begin Ma'ariv, I have a question for us. As we think back on the week that we've just experienced, think back on the moments that have called for us to bring forth our highest degrees of patience. Were these moments serious moments, and were they indeed important, or were they times of just inconsequential emotion that sometimes our feelings got away from us? As the sage Hillel might have said in our day, let our strong emotions be spent for things, as he would say, that are really for the sake of heaven, that is, when it truly matters. And let the other matters that might be less important or lighthearted or simple be just that, lighthearted moments when we get to observe all the ups and downs and the advantages and the foibles of being human. We invite you to turn to page 146 as we begin our Ma'ariv service. 146 is Baruch Hu, a call to worship. We invite the congregation to rise in body or in spirit.
Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMevorach.
Baruch Adonai HaMevorach leolam va'ed.
Baruch Adonai HaMevorach leolam va'ed.
On page 149.
Praise to you, Adonai our God, from whom the evening flows. Your wisdom sets the way of which time and seasons glide. Your breath guides the sail of the stars. Creator of the tide of time and light, you guide the current of day into night. As heaven spans to infinity, you set its course for eternity. Praise to you, Adonai our God, from whom the evening flows. Baruch atah Adonai HaMa'ariv Aravim.
We continue on page 150 at the top, Ahavat Olam.
Ahavat Olam, Beit Yisrael, Amcha ahavta, Amcha ahavta. Torah u'mitzvot, chukim u'mishpatim, Otanu limadeta, Otanu limadeta. Al kein Adonai Eloheinu b'shochbeinu, uvkumenu nasiach b'chukecha, v'nismach b'divrei toratecha, uv'mitzvotecha le'olam va'ed. Chayenu ve'orech yameinu uvahem nege yomam v'layla, nege yomam v'layla. Ve'ahavatcha al tasir mimenu le'olamim. Baruch atah Adonai, Ohev Amo Yisrael, Ohev Amo Yisrael.
Page 152.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed. Please be seated. We continue at the top of 154.
ואהבת אין אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך ושיננתם לבניך ודיברתם בשבתך ובביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך וקשרתם מאוד על ידך והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי והייתם קדושים לאלוהיהם אני אדוני אלוהיהם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם אלוהים אני אדוני אלוהיכם.
We continue on page 157 at the middle of the page.
In a world torn by violence and pain, a world far from wholeness and peace, give us the courage to say, Adonai, there is one God in heaven and earth. The high heavens declare your glory. May earth reveal your justice and love. From bondage in Egypt we were delivered. At Sinai we bound ourselves to your way. Inspired by prophets and instructed by sages, time and again we overcame oppressive forces. Though our failings are many and our faults are great, it has been our glory to bear witness to our God, keeping alive in dark ages your vision of a world redeemed. Let us continue to work for the day when the nations will be one and at peace. Then shall we rejoice as Israel did, singing on the shores of the sea.
On page 158.
Ya bye bye bim bim bam, ya bye bye bim bam, ya bye bye bim bim bam, ya bye bye bim bam. Ay ay la 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 la, ya bye bye bim bam. Ay ay la 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 la, ya bye bye bim bam. Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi kamocha nehedar b'kodesh. Nora tehilot osefele, Nora tehilot osefele. Malechutecha ra'u v'anecha, bokei hayam lifnei Moshe u'Miriam. זה אלי אנו אמרו אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד. יא ביי ביי בים בים בם, יא ביי ביי בים בם, יא ביי ביי בים בים בם, יא ביי ביי בים בם. איי איי לה 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 לה, יא ביי ביי בים בם. איי איי לה 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 לה, יא ביי ביי בים בם. ונאמר כי פדה אדוני את יעקב וגאלו ביד חזק ממנו. ברוך אתה אדוני גאל ישראל.
Amen. We continue on page 160.
Grant, O God, that we lie down in peace, and raise us up, our guardian, to life renewed. Spread over us the shelter of your peace. Guide us with your good counsel. For your name's sake, be our help. Shield and shelter us beneath the shadow of your wings. Defend us against enemies, illness, war, famine, and sorrow. Distance us from wrongdoing. For you, God, watch over us and deliver us. For you, God, are gracious and merciful. Guard our going and coming to life and to peace evermore.
ושמור צאתנו ובואנו לחיים ולשלום מעתה ועד עולם. ברוך אתה אדוני, הפורש סוכת שלום עלינו ועל כל עמו ישראל ועל ירושלים.
There are many members of our men's club whom we remember who are sadly no longer part of our world, and one of the inspiring people whom we are thinking about now is Lou Swidarski, who in his day led us annually in Yismachu. And so now we are inviting all the men's club members to come up and to offer together Yismachu. It's on page 162, the second half of the page. So all of the men's club members who would like to participate with us as we offer Yismachu, please come on up and join one another up here. This is one of Lou's very favorite pieces, and I think that for so many years we enjoyed him and his presence, and he is with us in spirit, obviously. So again, page 162.
As close as you're comfortable.
Come on, get real close to the microphone, friends.
ישמחו במלכותך, שומרי 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 שבת וקוראי עונג שבת. ישמחו במלכותך, שומרי 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 שבת וקוראי עונג שבת. שומרי 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 שבת וקוראי עונג שבת. והשביעי רצית בו וקידשנו שבת. עמדה ימים אותו קראת שבת. Oh
How beautiful that was. Invite Steve to stay. Yeah. We want to invite the congregation now to turn to page 165.
Prayer invites God's presence to suffice our spirits, God's will to prevail in our lives. Prayer may not bring water to parched fields, not mend a broken bridge, nor rebuild a ruined city, but prayer can water an arid soul, mend a broken heart, rebuild a weakened will.
We invite the community to rise in body or in spirit for the tefillah. It will begin on page 164, and then we'll continue on the Hebrew pages, well, both Hebrew and English pages thereafter, page 164.
Adonai safafakita ufia giletilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips that my mouth may declare your praise.
166.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu Elohei Avotenu v'imotenu Elohei Avraham Elohei Yitzhak Elohei Yaakov Elohei Sarah Elohei Rivka Elohei Rachel Elohei Leah El Hagadol Hagibor ve'anora El Elyon Gomel Hasadim Tovim V'konei Hakol V'zoher Haste Avot V'ima'ot U'mayulala Lifnei Nilchem Lema Shemo Be'ahava Melech Ozera U'Moshiach Magen Baruch atah Adonai Magen Avraham Ve'ezrat Sarah.
We're on page 167.
Thank you. Slightly taller. Some perished by fire, some by water. Some crossed the sea or watered the desert. Some starved all week to make for a Shabbat feast, while some were left childless until old age. Some lifted their chins beneath the Father's knife. Those who came before us gave everything, so that we, generations later, could glorify you. And despite the dangers, with your protection, some did survive and even flourished. Some reaped in joy, were spared the knife, were granted children. We are their inheritors, O God, and we know how rare is our good fortune to be born to such hard-won treasures. A great responsibility is ours, and yours as well. For if you did not sustain us as you did Abraham and Sarah, Rebekah and Isaac, Jacob, Rachel, and Leah, then who would sing your praises? Who would lift their chins as we do now to sanctify your name?
We continue on page 170.
Ata kadosh v'simha kadosh u'kadoshim b'yom yom v'alalu la'sela Baruch atah Adonai ha'el ha'kadosh.
The congregation may be seated, and we continue on page 173.
May these hours of rest and renewal open our hearts to joy and our minds to truth. May all who struggle find rest on this day. May all who suffer find solace. May all who hurt find healing on this day. May all who despair find purpose. May all who hunger find fulfillment on this day, and may this day fulfill its promise. Baruch atah Adonai mekadesh haShabbat.
Amen. We continue on page 175.
You are with us,
in our prayer, our love, and our doubt, in our longing to feel your presence and do your will. You are the still, clear voice within us. Therefore, O God, when doubt troubles us, when anxiety makes us tremble, when pain clouds the mind, we look inward for the answer to our prayers. There we may find you, and there find courage, insight, and endurance. And let our worship bring us closer to one another, that all Israel and all who seek you may find new strength for your service.
On page 178, we continue with Shalom Rav.
Shalom Rav al Yisrael amcha tasim leolam. Shalom Rav al Yisrael amcha tasim leolam. Ki ata melech adon lechol hashalom. Ki ata melech adon lechol hashalom. Shalom Rav al Yisrael amcha tasim leolam. Shalom Rav al Yisrael amcha tasim leolam. V'tov be'einecha levarech et amcha Yisrael bechol עת ובכל שעה ישלומך. Shalom Rav al Yisrael amcha tasim leolam. Shalom Rav al Yisrael amcha tasim leolam. Tasim leolam. Tasim leolam.
On page 179.
Grant us peace, your most precious gift, O eternal source of peace, and give us the will to proclaim its message to all the peoples of the earth. Bless our country as a safeguard of peace, its advocate among the nations. May contentment reign within our borders, health and happiness within our homes. Strengthen the bonds of friendship and fellowship among all the inhabitants of every land. Plant virtue in every soul, and may the love of your name hallow every home and every heart. Praised are you, Eternal One, who blesses our people with peace. Baruch atah Adonai, hamavorech et amo Yisrael, b'shalom.
Amen. We are about to engage in silent prayer, and before that, I'd like to offer this meditation that I found. I've adapted it from the words of Martin Buber. And he writes something like this. At moments of greatest silence, when we try to understand the words that our mouths cannot even utter, it is at that time that we must explore with great expectation that which has been given to us as humans. Let us look inside and let us elevate and refresh our lives just as we would refresh our bodies with cool water from a well. It is our sacred obligation to recognize the deepest vision of ourselves. It is our sacred obligation to attend to the power that elevates our soul. We now offer time for silent prayer, and we'll be concluding when we get there on page 180 with Yehiyu L'Ratzon.
לרצון
לרצון
עם רפי והגיון ליבי לפניך אדוני
Adonai
צורי
Suri
וגואלי אדוני
Suri
וגואלי May the words
May the words
of my mouth
of my mouth
and the meditations of my heart be acceptable to you, O God, my rock and my redeemer. Yehu liratzon
Ratzon
Refi והגיון ליבי לפניך אדוני
Adonai
צורי
Suri
וגואלי אדוני צורי
Before we continue, I would like to acknowledge Sanford Karimi, who helped organize this night of Men's Club Shabbat, along with Cantor Nami, and they have put together a beautiful service with great participation. Thank you both for doing a wonderful, wonderful job on this night. They bring healing and solace, and with that song, with that prayer that we just uttered, you bring healing and solace to this community, Sanford and Cantor. So thank you very much. And now we continue with our prayer for healing. We want to invite you to turn to page 371, as we do, to offer Misha Berach, a prayer of healing and wholeness. For a moment, I'd like each of us to hold in our minds and in our hearts someone who needs healing. We all know of someone whose health has not been the best lately, or who may have had an acute situation in recent weeks or recent days. We know of people in the hospital. We know of people at home. We know of those individuals who are ailing perhaps because of a lack of spirit or because of a soured spirit for whatever reason. And so we think of them and we pray for healing and wholeness for them. We have about 75 or so people on our ongoing healing list at Temple Bethel. And there may be others who individually you all think about on this night. And whether you are online with us and you are thinking about someone who also needs a prayer of healing, or whether you're here in our sanctuary on this night, hold that person dear. Or if you have more than one, hold them dear in your heart. And if you would like to offer their names here to add to those already on our healing list, we'll invite you to do so. And I'm just going to scan around the community. And if you know of someone, just add their name to our list. Other names, I'm sorry. Other names we want to offer here tonight.
All those suffering from lack of world peace.
The injured and the wounded in so many, the innocent, injured, and wounded in so many parts of our world. Indeed. We offer Misha Berach here at the middle of the page.
Mi sheberach avotenu mikor habracha leimotenu. May the source of strength, who bless the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Mi sheberach imotenu mikor habracha lavotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. I'd like to invite now to the pulpit the coordinator of tonight's Men's Club Shabbat service, who will introduce our guest speaker. Sanford, if you would join us here, Dr. Sanford Karimi. You're welcome. Oh, that's a good idea.
Good evening and Shabbat Shalom. I'd like to welcome to Temple Bethel this evening Jonathan Rosenblum, a Madison attorney, author, and former advisor to Bill Clinton's White House task force on sweatshops, who will be contrasting the cult of religious authority in Leviticus to glimmers of wider participation by the people, while offering some surprising lessons for today's leaders in efforts to improve American fair labor governance. As a labor attorney and writer, Jonathan's advocacy-oriented work has made significant impact both local, national, as well as global levels. Originally out of the Chicagoland area, Jonathan became a bar mitzvah at the Returned Synagogue at Beth Emmet in Evanston, Illinois, and began his own introduction into the world of labor with his first job as a teenager teamster working for UPS on the graveyard shift. While an undergraduate at Duke University in the late 70s, where he earned his BA in political science and French, Jonathan investigated and wrote about civil rights, including the acquittal of Ku Klux Klan members for the murders of anti-Klan activists. His writings are preserved at the University of Wisconsin-Greensboro Civil Rights Archive, and his ongoing publications has earned him top awards from North Carolina's Press Association news and feature articles. Returning back to the Chicago area, Jonathan earned his JD degree at Northwestern University of Law in '91, while still pursuing his passion as a political journalist. In '96, his acclaimed book, Copper Crucible, How the Arizona Miners' Strike of '83 Recast Labor Management Relationships in America, was named to Princeton University's library that year 10 noteworthy books in industrial relations and labor economics. After graduating from law school, Jonathan became the first U.S. citizen to serve as a legal staffer for the United Nations International Labor Organization's Committee on Freedom of Association. When he returned to the U.S. in '94, he represented Reform Rabbi Herman Schallman with the Chicago Religious Leadership Network in its fight against sweatshop labor. Jonathan was a founding participant of President Clinton's Apparel Industry Task Force, which worked to establish a nonprofit association protecting sweatshop workers. That association still operates in Washington today, is known as the Fair Labor Association. Several other examples include serving as general counsel for the Wisconsin Education Association Trust employees, delivering one of the few successful lawsuits against our former governor, Scott Walker, whose anti-labor policies and attempts to strike down and restrict public speech at Wisconsin State Capitol needed to go checked. And also while establishing Madison's Interfaith Coalition, working for justice of South Central Wisconsin in '99, that organization, now referred to as Workers Just in Wisconsin. And based upon something that he helped champion, an anti-discrimination settlement reached on behalf of the Latinos at the University of Wisconsin, has now created the seed funding for WJW's Worker Center, which is able to aid all area low-income workers regardless of their immigration status. Jonathan exemplifies the spirit of Men's Club, fostering and sharing his own passion of fair labor, and even passing this on to his son, Simon. While Simon himself is gifted in baseball, actually drafted by the MLB, and was actually pitching with the Tampa Bay Rays until recently, Simon went on to organize a union in the minor leagues in 22, and he now serves as program officer for the AFL-CIO Global Democracy Program. Jonathan, you are a true mensch and advocate of Jewish values of fairness and equity for all players, and we thank you for joining us this evening and sharing your Devar, which is entitled Leviticus, from a priestly cult to rumblings of power to the people. I present you Jonathan Rosenblum.
Thank you. Thank you, Sam. Shabbat Shalom. And thank you, Rabbi, for letting me steal your Plaut Torah to take home. Oh, I brought it back. That was a confession. I don't know if you bring your books back to people, but thank you. I did bring this book back to your congregation. First, let me thank the Men's Club. And I have to say, having gotten to know some of you, some before and some more recently, just to give tribute to your leadership, which I must say reads like a pretty awesome wellness team, besides everything else. I mean, imagine, no one here could ever lose their voice even before Drs. Schwartzstein and Karimi come in with a remedy. And Dayenu, if it's your cognitive voice, NASW local president Mark Herstand arrives to offer a talk therapy fix. As to Temple Bethel's wider membership, if you have a legal issue, you have merely Wisconsin's greatest counselor in Lester Pines. But honestly, someday I'd like to see an intramural legal jeopardy match, if possible, between Lester Pines of Bethel and Jordan Loeb of my current home congregation, Beth Israel Center. If you know Jordy. If you don't, Lester and Jordy work together, and if Judaism isn't about good argument, what is it about? That's just the men. I've recently come to know leadership like Leslie Koff and Stephanie Kushner, your amazing Temple Bethel leadership. And there are three other people that must get strong hugs here. Rabbi Jonathan, Rabbi Bonnie, wherever you are, who I've known and worked with in various endeavors nearly since they arrived in Madison. And my partner, Lana Shklyar Nenide, your new board member. And I'm not saying this because I'm getting to speak, but she has taken tonight her beautiful 1-year post-Bethel bat mitzvah daughter, Anushka, on a dream trip to see the Rudolf Nureyev choreographed Don Quixote on a Paris stage. Yeah. And forgive my promo, but Anushka herself is a dancer, and you can buy tickets for her spring showcase on May 4th at the Central Midwest Ballet Academy on their website. This has been a public service announcement alongside this other public service announcement, which I think is also called a Devar. So let's talk a little tachlis. The parsha for tonight, is Tzav, or God's commands to the priesthood. on how the ancients created a cult of sacrifice. Bulls, goats, lambs, birds, even a kind of odd pancake. To expiate sin, admit guilt, give thanks for great escapes and close calls. I've called my talk tonight a bit more broadly Leviticus, from a priestly cult to rumblings of power to the people. And I somehow have promised this twist that Sanford mentioned, a connection from Leviticus to what we face today in soul and mind amid unprecedented political upheaval, both in our ancestral homeland and in the United States. I hope I get to that, but if I improvise too much and take up a little too much time, ask me at the ONAG. Let me say how I came to tonight's title, because every Dvar is part bio. I grew up in the Reformed community of Evanston, Illinois, with Rabbi David Polish, Rabbi Peter Noble, and current Rabbi Andrea London at Beth Emet Synagogue. The forward-thinking essence of Reformed Judaism was a story to me from my earliest awakenings to religion, or I might also say political education. The year I was born, when de facto segregation still ravaged this country, Reverend Martin Luther King accepted an invitation from Rabbi David Polish of Beth Emet. Dr. King was 27 years old, 5 years before the March on Washington, 7 years before Bloody Sunday in Alabama. Dr. King came to Evanston and asked Midwestern Jews to join him in his struggle in Montgomery and elsewhere in the South. And many did join him, including Rabbi Polish in Selma. More from the academy, and by example and not travel, my father, Victor, was also very much engaged and had introduced our family to Beth Emet. I had not yet been born, but it was close. Reformed Judaism was particularly well placed to relate to and understand the forms of injustice and discrimination of which Dr. King spoke. And I might say also that it was the Reform rabbi of Memphis, Tennessee, who ended up finding the way to settle the very labor strike that led Dr. King to Memphis on that horrible, tragic occasion in which he was assassinated. He was there to protest the unfair conditions of the public sector workers of Memphis. And the Reform rabbi there, one of us will remember his name of blessed memory, was a key to settling on behalf of those workers. So even tonight's Mishkan Tefillah Reform Prayer Book, and according to Sanford's brilliant printed order of show, tonight's melodies also contain references to my Beth Emet Free Synagogue Evanston roots. The late Evanston Rabbi Peter Noble from Beth Emet worked for 2 decades chairing the Reform Committee that created this book of prayer in 2007, as well as including in it these extraordinary, beautiful gleanings and poetry for Shabbat and for the holidays, one of which was read tonight as a prayer, so beautiful in English, but not actually from the Hebrew. It was, I don't know who gets the credit, but it was just an absolutely beautiful poem. And Peter Noble's first cantor, Jeff Klepper, is in this program you have tonight as the author of 2 of the melodies, and he was writing those from Evanston and Beth Emet, and is still a friend of ours and my family. The Misha Berach that we sing is his melody. Now let's enter the cult, the club, as it were. Our Mishkan Tefillah, our tabernacle of Tefillah, invites us tonight into the Mishkan of Leviticus. and vice versa. Without the Mishkan, the tabernacle of Leviticus, we wouldn't have the prayer service that we have tonight. And without the Mishkan of Leviticus, the Israelite people would not perhaps play the central participatory role that we play in our service and even our community. That's an odd statement in a way, because Leviticus is not easy reading. Bar and bat mitzvahs call it holy terror. Not just because it's sometimes scary, but because sometimes mere 12 or 13-year-olds have to go deep on commentaries about leprosy and other very challenging topics, shall we say. It is very, very cultic. Bulls, blood, fat, blood on the antlers, blood on the altar, blood on the ear, the thumb, the big toe even. It is ordination, initiation, a fraternity, a barbecue, a men's club of another kind, but like the old joke goes, not necessarily one you join if it would have you as a member. It has a forever fire, don't let it go out. It has barely one strong narrative element in the entire Leviticus. And in that sense, one modern commentator calls this film noir. Suddenly, Aaron's sons make the wrong fire and are themselves roasted. At a neutral level, others actually have called Leviticus a kind of giant beef processing plant, a slaughterhouse, an operations manual. It catches your attention for sure. And it's full of odd echoes of past life idol worship for the tribes, but in the name of this revolutionary new one God. But Leviticus also beckons the reader to look closely and explore the fine print. I don't know if my fine print has made it to the screen, but this is where I might ask you to. We have a little excerpt, a little. Right behind you. Wow. Okay, I didn't see it. Oh, there it is. Okay, so this is the Torah, sort of, and as you can imagine, is basically the same script in every Torah that is read on this Vayikra. And so I'm starting here with a fairly graphic example of Leviticus. And right at the start, you'll notice that there is an odd aleph up there. That says Vayikra somehow, and it has an aleph in it, but it's been written almost in miniature. And why is it there? Well, could it already be a glimmer, a rumble of some other hidden message that we have to pay attention to with Leviticus that's different from that odd intro that I've given? The Midrash, a Midrash, there is no such thing as the Midrash. Is there really a Midrash?
There is Midrash.
There's Midrash. Sometimes people don't even say where this comes from, so we just say it's Midrash. It's a good story. Moses argues with God, and this argument is that God wants the word Vayikra, stam, simple, Vayikra. And Moses argues and says that he doesn't really want to be called specifically, Moses, get over here, you're going to instruct the people. Moses argues and says, couldn't it be Vayikar, a different word, the same verb, but a different tense, a lower key communication from God, such that the people hear that there's an occurrence, Moses. Come over here for this communication. It's not your calling. I'm not calling you. There is this occurrence, a different root with no aleph in it. So basically, Moses is asking God to delete the aleph. And I, as an editor, which I've been, I can appreciate that. He just wants a slightly different word, and God firmly disagrees in this midrash. And Moses says, how about a compromise? Let's make it a tiny aleph. Just so my message of not being the figure, the authority, the central leader. Let me share this with the people. And that is where the midrash says that aleph comes from. So that's a little fanciful, but it takes me in the direction that I hope has some basis in the text of Leviticus. And that is that this is the people's aleph, calling us as readers, as listeners, to look for subtleties. And even to appreciate that beyond the midrash, that the mystics too have looked at that aleph in the Kabbalic tradition, said, well, okay, maybe what this aleph represents is this, maybe they always repeat it this way, but this is what they say, that this is representative of God's retraction from the universe, that calls on people and Jews themselves to keep the flame burning. So God's presence is at least retracted. So we're back to Tzav, a portion of this Leviticus, which is tonight and this weekly reading, and I'd like to underline a few more points that at least present to you a basis to say that all of this cultic stuff that is commanded and is part of making holy the community of Israel, it's worth zooming in more. And content-wise, Leviticus offers us a few other points of interest for considering something other than this authority, this insistence that a priestly leadership, Moses to Aaron's sons, has to be the central kind of hierarchy of Judaism. So just to toss out a few, the areas that struck me in my reading of Leviticus, you have this odd content along the way toward a formula for holiness that refers not only to sacrifices, but also to this really essential holy, sacred role of the priests or others to take the ashes of the sacrifice outside of the tabernacle and carry these ashes in solitude to a pure place outside of the camp. Really an odd kind of mission that goes along with everything else, that's sort of the light, the fire that's attracting the attention of the Israelites. But then the ashes, what are they doing there? And then you have this Mosaic communication to the priests. God says to the priests, but God also says, B'nai Israel, that even though this cultic formulation is going to the leaders of the cult, the whole point of this is to have the entire population hearing it just like they did the Ten Commandments. And so in Leviticus itself, you have kind of this worth paying attention to language of B'nai Israel in certain sections. That is, Moses and others are speaking to the full congregation. And then you have a reference as it progresses to Edut Yisrael, to the community of Israel, or give me another translation for Edut. Testimony of, yeah, but with this aggregate there. And so this idea of this narrow priesthood is already beginning to blend into something else in Leviticus. And then there's the word itself, the word of our portion now, which is tzav. And, well, Vayikra is up there because that's the first word of Leviticus. And the first word ends up in Hebrew as being the word we use. Leviticus is our, oddly, isn't it? Like afikomen, this adopted Greek word for what is, Levites. This is all about Levites, priests and Levites, and that's why it's Leviticus. But we also use the word or a word early on in a parsha to call it a parsha, and that's tzav. And that sounds just like what Moses was dealing with. It's a word for command, but command can also be interpreted as Robert Alter, this pretty famous Berkeley professor that I think we all wish we could study with at some point. He's still alive and wonderful and does great translations. And I don't know if sometimes they're more popular than they are scholarly, but he translates tzav, command, as deed rather than command. And the reason I underline that again is in terms of the notion of the people power available possibly in Leviticus, that if you were choosing your deed, if you were the one confessing that it's time for a sin offering or a guilt offering or a thanksgiving offering because you were the one that had the close call in your life, you're engaging in a deed as well as carrying out a command. But if you engage in the deed, you're doing something that takes an active role and is a meaningful, in my view, a meaningful difference in terms of what Leviticus is about. Two other points, and somebody can also help me keep time, but it's not like a courtroom, is it, where you get a judge? Would you? Never mind. Thank you. I have more than that, though. In any case, I can skip through the others more quickly. This one is really crucial as another point, because my son, Sanford mentioned him, who I love and who couldn't be here tonight because he's working on worker rights stuff. And he's actually just come back to the US from Thailand, where he's been organizing low-wage workers at the request of the unions there, or workers there for the AFL-CIO. But his parsha, his bar mitzvah portion, was not leprosy, but it was Leviticus, and it was Bahar Bahukotai. It's a joint Leviticus section that rather beautifully and amazingly contains the story of the Jubilee year. So if you want to go from the cult to this odd transition of focus of Leviticus, he had to interpret this early Jewish socialism, you could call it, even better than the kibbutzim, as the Jubilee year, which involves the dismissal of debts every 50 years, or 7 times the sabbatical year, you get, at least in theory, at least in Torah principle, nobody is very clear on whether the creditors ever actually had to deal with this. But this Yuval, and it's an amazing turn from this rite and cult of sacrifice to a political agenda for all the people. I want to more or less quote my son to you, and because it's significant to my theme, and it is, as he's working on this, Dad, is God a progressive? And so within this also, this tithing, this sabbatical year, the Shemitah, the preservation of land, food for the poor, and the whole idea of a sabbatical, which hopefully some of you get to take every now and then, even if it's not called a sabbatical. So these parts are also of Leviticus. That said, we're still within the history and context of and time of Leviticus. We're still living a fiery Mishkan. It is the time of either the portable people or of the coming kingdoms of Saul and Solomon. So we haven't, these principles are there, but the sacrifices are still essential to the Jewish people. That's not what we do now, so something happened. And at the same time as this notion of Leviticus being possibly an engagement with people, you'll note that even tonight, I don't know that we have anybody reading it, but that the Haftorah of Jeremiah is in some sense like Isaiah, a critique of these very sacrifices that are ordered and commanded to the cult. That is, you remember it from Yom Kippur. Forget about these sacrifices. What you need to do is good deeds. Help the poor, help the sick, help the elderly. And so there's already an argument within the Jewish community of what would otherwise appear to be these sacred words of God. I'm no historian. I'm not an expert on this, but let me just carry the theme along to what does happen to take this cultic Judaism into something that becomes more available to the people and that at least arguably accounts for the resilience of Judaism, our incredible resilience and staying power, which has necessarily a little bit of a political element alongside the religious. How can we pull these apart? I'm not sure we can. But Jewish political history, Jewish history crashes at this point, after the fall of the Second Temple. Lamentations. Is this going to be the end of Judaism? There won't be any sacrifices. We can't do what God commanded. So where are we? And where we are is that the kings and the priests have to hand over Leviticus, essentially, to the Talmudists, the Talmud, and also to later to political theorists. We have a completely tragic, transformative moment. And so to explain how a cult like Leviticus could prepare us for prayer, for Mishkan Tefillah, instead of the Mishkan of the flaming bull, this was a learning experience for me for this preparation, to see the Talmud itself as a kind of place of argument in which this priestly role is suddenly at odds with, the priests can't do what they're supposed to do. It's forbidden. There's no tabernacle. There is no temple. So now you have the question of whether the priests or something other, like a rabbinic expert community, but a community closer to this idea of a nation of priests, is going to be engaged and able to carry on if it's not a cult now, it's something else. So at this time, the very order of the sacrifices that we were just looking at in Leviticus, according to our sages, becomes the order of prayer. No more bulls, but an order of prayer. And in that setting, the very name of a sacrifice in Leviticus, for example, mincha, that we might or might not daven every day, but that sacrifice, which I earlier referred to as the pancake of the poor, becomes our afternoon service. We're not sacrificing, but we are praying. And incidentally, I guess I should confess at this point that that mincha often takes place while I am at that sacred Madison place, the original pancake house, just parenthetically. We move along in this cult to Yavne, where the rabbis, the sages argue with each other and write the Talmud, to Galut, where we're expelled again, and now we're wherever we are, trying to figure out what to do with Judaism and whether we'll survive and what this journey is about. And so this project of prayer becomes in some ways a formula for enabling Judaism to survive with discipline, with the habit of what one could possibly begin to call self-government in the absence of government. It's a big leap, but within all of this challenge, Jews have to figure out how to live and live in religion and in government during this time. And so this is where I can kind of accelerate, but I want to connect this history and this evolution from prayer from sacrificial ritual and cult to prayer to something more like kahal, or community, where now we're dispersed all over the place and we're trying to figure out who we are. And this is where I can stop talking and let some of the other scholars and sages speak on my behalf. And I just want to throw out a few names to you of people who I have found remarkable in my own attempt at understanding Judaism, of understanding Reform Judaism to other aspects of the tradition, and then come back to you with a couple of thoughts about governance, and yes, even about the role of unions and our associations that connect us through, I think, a Jewish experience of self-rule and association. So because there's a connection again to Bethel, I want to underline the name of one of the people who I think of as essential to this kind of evolution or understanding of cult to community to self-governance, and that is Michael Walzer. Have any of you heard of that scholar? So Michael is an emeritus Princeton professor who wrote two books that, I mean, he's written many, many books, but two of them are especially worth attention for this, and especially around Pesach by chance. One of them is called Exodus or Revolution, and it is essentially a collection of the experiences of Judaism through community, but also African-American experiences of minorities who have had to migrate, had to carry their traditions out, and who themselves reference the Exodus as essential to their experience. And that experience itself of revolution, Exodus or revolution, has yielded a better kind of appreciation of where the faith, a faith, enables them to pick up and participate in rescuing themselves and re-establishing their communities. The reason I mention him in particular is that he is the brother-in-law to one of your other great wellness docs of your congregation, which is Louis Levitt. I don't know, I assume that, or if I've seen Louis here, then if I've seen him here at the great electoral deli, which I assume means that he's a member here, even if I was an interloper. But anyway, Judy is the sister of Michael Walzer. And Michael's other great work, which is really essential to this discussion, which I'll quickly reference, is called The Jewish Political Tradition. And it was going to be one book and turned, like the Torah, into 5. And that particular work is taking this period of Galut and trying to bring documentation and stories and authorities from rabbis to community leaders into a collection that people can access in order to understand what a future actual state or an existing state of Israel can benefit from the history and experience of being in exile, of using prayer and community as governance. So I was going to quote something from Michael's work, but I'm going to jump over that in order to get to my last point, or my last support for some of this idea of the importance of community, of the evolution of cult to community, to prayer, to self-governance. Michael, just in terms of what the Jewish political tradition actually says, and that's essential to this understanding, is that is that associations built by Jews in the diaspora have depended for their success on the reform and retreat, in some ways, of sectarian religion, of, I won't say Orthodox Judaism, but the growth of tolerance, the replication of a forum of exile. And of these political thinkers, the biggest worry for those thinkers about what these hundreds or thousands of years have yielded for Jews, the biggest worry is that the fundamentalist Yahadut would attempt to return Israel to a world of sacrifices or cult. And in my own riff, I might say to attempt to employ, as a lawyer, biblical stories as legal land grant. And why am I so passionate about this? Well, partly because in my opportunity to explore Judaism, I did have this very tremendously exciting experience of participating in one of the seminars that created this book back in 1997 in Jerusalem during a year of study at a place called the Pardes Institute, which is a lovely place for kind of balancing literature against what some might feel to be lived text. So my final reference point for the Levitical, not final, but there'll be a last footnote, the Levitical story of cult to power to the people is the story also of America and also connected to Wisconsin, which is that of a visitor to Wisconsin in the late 1800s, if I have the date right, of Alexis de Tocqueville. And I see each of these works as sort of pieces of this project of understanding the importance of associations in community in which we replicate governance. We go from command to deed, and we become the leaders of a communal organization, like the Men's Club. And we experience democracy. And it's Alexis de Tocqueville who lands in Green Bay, Wisconsin. Not many know this. And his tour of America, which is initially to look at penal colonies, prisoners in America, ends up becoming a search for understanding why it seems that America has such robust governance at the local levels that seems to encourage a moderation even at the national level with a government that seems to be of the people. And so Tocqueville, among his most famous passages in his work, are observations of the voluntary, quote, spirit of association that he finds in American communities, detached from national politics. He sees local associations as organic institutions that mediate between citizens and the state, and he commends the genius of the design of the American constitutional system with checks and balances and federalist structures, instrumental in curbing the dangers of excessive democracy. And he reserves praise for the decentralization of power and localism as safeguards against despotism. And he notes that he's surprised at how quickly even recent immigrants immerse themselves and participate in political life. So that's a bigger leap, if you're wondering where the connection is and why Alexis de Tocqueville, a non-Jew visiting in Green Bay, Wisconsin, would connect to Leviticus. I guess it's for the oneg. I think I've gone on too long. But to come back to the Mishkan Tefillah and to our moment, I think I want to conclude with a blessing. I'm not going to make a blessing, but I'm going to underline a blessing that I think brings some of these points together. And it's a blessing that we're probably all going to utter in a few weeks at the time of Pesach. And this, to me, is one of the most significant lessons of my Jewish learning, and that I'm just kind of looping back to Leviticus and to this evolution, because I think that it says a really vital thing about the importance of reform within a religion and the importance, as I see it, of that transition from the cult. And so I'm going to borrow Anushka's gift of Mishkan Tefillah from Beth, and I'm going to turn to, you don't need to turn to this, but there is the Kiddush, as we recited it tonight, and in the Kiddush are the words, Baruch atah Adonai mekadesh haShabbat. Sounds pretty simple, right? We're going to bless Shabbat, and we do that every Friday night. But on Pesach, we do something different, and it connects all these pieces, in my view, which is that when we determine the beginning of Shabbat, it's, when the sun is set. It's not our choice exactly when we're going to recite the blessings. There's lots of arguments about when you recite the Shema, but in this case, the Kiddush is not really our choice. But in the holidays, in Pesach, there is this odd feature that let's just see what the actual Kiddush says. The Kiddush in the festivals says, Baruch atah Adonai mekadesh Yisrael v'hazmanim. So we say that we're going to bless Israel and the festivals, but we choose the time. We don't wait for God to tell us when to start and make the blessing. The Pesach table is our Mizbeach. We have created an event, the Exodus from Israel, inclusive of all the various kinds of miracles, but it's our table. It's our table as Jews, and it is our decision as Jews when that table is to be elevated into a sacred space. And that, I believe, is consistent with an essential part of the story of this Levitical transition from cult to some degree of power to the people, and that Pesach itself represents this really sort of extraordinary governing role, participatory role, as if you lived it, and we, Orthodox, Reform, all of us, have that power to make that decision, and that ingrained, embedded, self-governing, communal concept, ideology, governance, is what I consider to be this notion of power to the people. One footnote, because Sanford said I would say something about labor within this, and it's this, okay, it's this. From my long study of labor, and maybe from your reviewing what's happening in the world, the economy in the United States, low-wage workers, attempts at unionization, even my old employer, UPS, scaring a lot out of people in determining whether to have strikes. The concepts that parallel this description of Leviticus and of self-governance, I consider to be within two words of sort of the labor movement. One is solidarity, and one is union democracy. I would never criticize or put down solidarity. It's a wonderful concept. It's a vital thing. It is basically staying with your kahal, your union community, through thick and thin and hanging together. But in union history, that can also be where the cult enters. That can be where trouble occurs. It has its dangers. It can lead to a priestly leadership of a union basically taking control and assuming or requiring compliance from its membership. That parallel has actually been visited upon me in my life, both as a lawyer and as a union advocate. Union democracy is about learning the governance of the union, having some degree of majority rule, and applying that to your organization and learning how to run it and sharing the power and sharing the decision-making. Somewhere within these two is a vital balance. And so I will end actually this drash or devar by saying that from a union lawyer's perspective, the model, example, and trouble of this is sometime take a minute and look at the recent history of the United Auto Workers. The United Auto Workers just won a big contract. It's a new union leader, and it's a vital example of communal transformation in terms of an economy that's changed, et cetera, et cetera. But the United Auto Workers just saw its 2 to 3 top leaders indicted federally for running a cult, for having, this is 3 years ago, for having had leadership that was caught up in a non-democratic, worn-out system of governance that has now been replaced by a communal majority vote union democracy. And so there, I will end this with that notion that there is application of these concepts. Maybe it's the surprise I promised, which is that within this vital notion of community is our lessons for governance. We must apply self-governance, our lessons in governance locally, deeply, radically, and urgently in order to save our national government from what is apparently or possibly next. We have crisis in our ancestral homeland. We have crisis in our national governance. I recommend to you not necessarily reading Leviticus in every word of it, but appreciating that there are messages in the tiny aleph that we have to pay close attention to. Thank you. Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you, Jonathan. Shabbat Shalom to you. Plenty of food for thought when we have food out in the community court for our Oneg Shabbat. We want to invite the community to turn in the prayer book to page 123. And we offer Kiddush together, as Jonathan had mentioned. On page 123, we offer the Kiddush for Shabbat evening.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav, v'ratzavanu, v'shabbat kodesho, ve'ahava uvratzon hinchilanu, zikaron lemaaseh v'reishit, ki hu yom techila lemikra'ei kodesh, zecher letziat Mitzrayim, ki banu v'charta, v'otanu kidashta, mikol ha'amim, v'shat kodshecha, ve'ahava u'ratzon, inchaltanu. Baruch atah Adonai, mekadesh hashabat l'chaim. Have some water.
Go here. We're good.
Thank you. I just think we want to continue our service now on page 586 with Aleinu. Again, we invite the congregation to rise in body or in spirit for Aleinu, page 586 at the top of the page.
עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שהוא נוטה שמיים ויוסד ארץ, ומושב יקרו בשמיים ממעל, ושכינת עוזו בגובהי מרומים, הוא אלוהינו אין עוד. ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא.
You may be seated. We continue on page 591.
May we gain wisdom in our lives, overflowing like a river with understanding, loved, each of us, for the peace we bring to others. May our deeds exceed our speech, and may we never lift up our hand but to conquer fear and doubt and despair. Rise up like the sun, O God, over all humanity. Cause light to go forth over all the lands between the seas, and light up the universe with the joy of wholeness, of freedom, and of peace.
ונאמר, והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא, ביום ההוא, יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו, ושמו, ושמו אחד.
Zecher Tzadik Livracha, may the memory of the righteous be a blessing. There are those whom we remember who are no longer part of our lives. They no longer inhabit the world we live in, but they still infuse our spirits with goodness, with wisdom, with teachings, with memories, memories that make us cry sometimes and memories that sustain us. And so we remember those who died in recent days and those whose Yartzeiten occur at this time, remembering the deeds they performed and how they influence us for good, even now. The recent deaths in our community and the Yartzeiten will be read, and if you are tonight present remembering someone, either because you're in mourning or because you're observing a Yartzeit, we invite you to rise as the name of your loved one is recited, and then you'll be joined by the whole community as together we recite the mourner's Kaddish. These are those whom we've taken into our hearts with our own. Our community's recent losses, we remember with love Jerry Stewart, a beloved member of this congregation, husband of Vicky Stewart. We remember Shirley Breslow, aunt of Marilyn Kupferberg, and a beloved member of this community, Barbara Bernstein, the wife of Howard Bernstein. And these are the Yartzeiten that we observe at this time: James Catrona, Aaron Cohen, Marv Connie, Ivy Drazen Edelman, Irving Israel Folberg, Bobby Frank, Jack Gustafson, Rogine S. Halpop, Jerome Edward Kahn, Kenneth R. Kaplan, Gladys D. Kaufman, Gary Kaufman, Esther Klinger, Zelda Cutler, Bella Leiser, Maxine Mayle, Milton Mayle, Harry Marion, Alan Orenstein, Dorothy Pollock Kirby, Diana Renner, Michael Schwartz, Sari Lynn Smith, Samuel R. Suchman, Charlotte Sweet, Norma Wollens, James Wolfson. We remember in our hearts and memories the victims of October 7th terror attack in Israel, as well as all of the innocent victims of terror, murder, and war in that region and around the world. And this year, this day, this week, perhaps because we do have union organized labor on our mind, and people who do things for us that we may not do. We remember 6 victims who fell to their deaths this past Tuesday evening or Monday evening at the collapse of the bridge in Baltimore. Alejandro Hernandez Fuentes, Dorlian Ronial Castillo Cabrera, Miguel Luna, Menor Yasir Suazo Sandoval, Jose Lopez, and apparently one yet unidentified victim. Again, they represent not only those workers on that bridge, some of whom were able to escape death, but all those, again, who do things for us that we may not be in the mind to do, as they filled potholes on that bridge and they were repairing that bridge that night. There may be others in our community this evening who are remembering loved ones, and if you would like to add your loved one's name to our list of memory, we invite you to do so now. Zichronam livracha. May all their memories be blessings in our hearts and our minds. We invite the community now to turn to page 598, and as a community we rise as one in body or in spirit to offer the words of the mourner's Kaddish, thanking God for the lives that were shared with us and thanking God for those who comfort us when we are most grieved and pained by our loss. Please join one another. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei rabbah, ve'alma divrach hirutei v'yamlich malchutei, v'chayechon uv'yomechon, uv'chayei d'chol Beit Yisrael, v'agala uv'izman kariv v'imru amen. Yehei shemei rabbah mevarach le'alam u'l'almei olmaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yithalal, shemei d'kudsha b'richu, le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata da'amiran be'alma v'imeru amen. Yehei shalama rabbah min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imeru amen. Oseh shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'al kol yoshvei tevel v'imeru amen. Please be seated. Before our service ends tonight, first I'd like to thank all the members of the Men's Club who participated in tonight's service, and those who, a few even find out at the last moment that they were participating. Thank you all so very much. Thank you again to Sanford Karimi and to Cantor Jacob Namey for preparing such a beautiful service. Thank you to Jonathan Rosenblum for offering your words of Torah tonight and your words of labor support. We all support that. We all support your being here and being here for this. Just a few brief announcements. First, tomorrow morning, there will be Torah study at 9 o'clock, looking at the first 8 chapters of the book of Joshua. That'll be here at Temple Beth El and on Zoom at 9 o'clock in the morning. Next Friday evening at 5:15 p.m. will be Likrat Shabbat family dinner. And at 6 o'clock will be our Likrat Shabbat, welcoming Shabbat worship that is for the whole community and is led by all grade levels of our religious school. Please join us as we honor our students and we honor one another by being here together. And also on Saturday, April 6th at 9 o'clock in the morning, more Torah study. On that week will be King David in the book of Samuel. And also at 4:30 that afternoon, we celebrate the bar mitzvah of Cole Klein, son of Carrie and Jacob Klein, as we gather for Mincha service to further our beautification of Shabbat. Please note all of the announcements that are on the page here in the back of the program. I'm not going to enumerate them, but please be sure to participate in all of the things that we do here at Temple Beth El. I now would like to invite you to turn in the supplement to page 4.
This song doesn't necessarily have to be sung only on our Men's Club Shabbat, though it has kind of ended up that way a little bit. It's really just a song about fellowship and friendship and finding joy in that. So we'll sing a bit together, first in Yiddish, then in English, then maybe in a little bit more Yiddish. And I'm not going to teach it to y'all. We'll get into it together. Mir seinen alle Brüder, oi, oi, alle Brüder, wir singen freiliche Lieder, oi, oi, oi. Und wir halten sich in einem, oi, oi, sich in einem, als welches ist nicht nur bei keinem, oi, oi, oi. Ai, 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 ai. Ay, 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 ay. Ay, 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 ay. Ay, 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 ay. Ay, 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 ay. We are here as friends and brothers, oi, oi, friends and brothers. We all sing with one another, oi, oi, oi. And as friends we stick together, oi, oi, stick together. Oh, the storms that we can weather, oi, oi, oi. Ay, 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 ay. Ay, 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 ay. Ay, 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 ay. Ay, 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 ay. Ay, 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 ay. Ay, 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 ay. Ay, 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 ay. Ay, 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 ay. Ay, 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 ay. Ay, 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 ay. Ay, 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 ay. Ay, 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 ay. Ay, 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 ay.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Please join us for the Oneg Shabbat, sponsored by our sisterhood.
Yeah.